Okay, guys, I want to show Doug and Stacy's new one, Off Grid with Doug and Stacy. Great information on a lot of different subjects. But here is one with vaccines in our food. Check this out. Very important information.
And here we go. Sometimes truth is stranger than fiction. We're going to start off this video. I'm going to just get right into it, okay? They're trying to put mRNA vaccine technology, gene therapy, in every single thing that you guys eat, right? And that's why Stacy and I left the city 14 years ago so we could grow most of our own food, and we're up to about 90%. And with this latest edition here, we're trying to push it closer to 100%, okay? Now, I brought up the topic a little while ago about that vaccine getting into the pork and the beef, okay? And I will follow up video on that tomorrow, so make sure you're subscribed to the channel so you can see the video tomorrow letting you know what's going on in Congress in our state with this bill that they're trying to pass in Missouri, okay? Now, I'm going to show you guys with your own eyes. These videos are 2 years old, one of them. Another one's over a year old, okay? So this isn't some new, fresh stuff they're trying. They've actually been working on this diligently because for some reason, they want to get gene therapy in everything on Earth. Like everything on Earth, especially in America, they want that gene therapy in it. Why? Why is it so important? Roll the tape.
What if someone said to you that plants could help cure type 1 diabetes or be used to create a vaccine against anthrax? Here at Penn, Professor Henry Daniel, his team, and the new high-tech greenhouse are now making what seems like science fiction into a reality.
At Penn, we have developed a new concept of making and delivering vaccines.
This was really interesting. Michael Flynn said that the vaccine is going to be in your salad dressing. Now, let me say this. We researched it. Even though he's wrong, there is some research happening around plants and a vaccine. But here's what Michael Flynn said.
You know, somebody sent me a thing this morning where they're talking about putting the vaccine into salad dressing or salads. Have you seen this?
Yes.
Have you seen it? I mean, I'm thinking to myself, this is the bizarro world, right? This is definitely the bizarro world. So there's the seriousness of what this professional realized he was doing wrong, and he's now, you know, he's found a new way. And then there's just the laughability on the other extreme that these people are seriously thinking about how to impose their will on us in our society, and it's
take away your freedom of choice.
Researchers have just launched a late-stage clinical trial on a whole new kind of COVID-19 vaccine, one that's grown in plants. They're looking for volunteers in San Diego. We're going in depth on what you might call the world's first vegan vaccine. Medicago's manufacturing facility looks like a nursery, but inside these plants, they're growing a new kind of vaccine, one that's now being tested in volunteers around the U.S., including in San Diego.
They can grow this material very fast.
Dr. Dennis Tarakjian is leading the local arm of the trial at the Medical Center for Clinical Research.
It's a 2-shot administration, 21 days apart.
The vaccines from Pfizer and Moderna contain little bubbles of genetic instructions that prompt your cells to make a fragment of the virus. Instead of a fragment, Medicago uses plants to grow particles that look like the entire coronavirus. Just check it out under a microscope.
The whole point is that it looks like a virus to your immune system so that you develop a really nice, robust response against it.
The technology is called a virus-like particle. The FDA approved the first vaccines using the platform in the 1980s for hepatitis B. But the big breakthrough happened in the late 2000s when regulators licensed 2 vaccines for human papillomavirus, or HPV. Dr. Tarakjian says we need as many vaccine options as possible to fight off variants.
It's an opportunity for you to be a part of a cutting-edge technology and be the solution to a problem that is devastating this whole world.
So for this phase...
Bullshit! You can't make this stuff up, okay? So what Stacy and I have done now is we've built a high tunnel. I showed you part 1 and part 2. If you missed that, you might want to go hunt those down and watch them because they're pretty interesting, and you can see how the whole high tunnel comes together. Now this is part 3. This is when we button it all up, and this is how it went.
Really good information from Doug and Stacy. This here is from Massachusetts School of Law, talking about all the chemicals that we are being taken part in, I guess you could call it. Her first video, that's very important, has already been removed from YouTube. The censorship is incredible. Please watch her video. It's really good information.
We are exposed on a regular basis to 100,000 chemicals every single day. It depends on the spew, where you are, and I do mean a spew because it's a toxic spew. And most of these have never been tested for human safety. We're the guinea pigs for an experiment that is way out of control. And this is one of the reasons that we have high rates of cancer, although right now cancer is number 2, superseded by cardiovascular problems, which is now number 1, and asthma, which I will mention later, is number 3. In addition, there are 8,000 new chemicals that go online every year to which we're also exposed. 8,000. These 2 have never been tested for human safety. Chemicals and pharmaceuticals are tested one at a time, and because the way things are right now, there are very few independent labs and few independent scientists. So a lot of this is, as I say, the fox is guarding a scenario that's really pretty awful. And we have known really since the 30s, particularly for issues surrounding women's reproductive problems, that tampons were unsafe in the 30s, but a lot of things are covered up, and that has not changed in 70 years. So having the pharmaceutical companies test things or the chemical companies test things doesn't necessarily mean that we're safe if something's put online. In addition, these safety factors that the chemical and the pharmaceutical companies test for, they're testing one chemical at a time. This does not address what Dr. Theo Colburn in Our Stolen Future in 1996 addressed, and that is it's multiple. And one chemical plus one chemical does not equal 2. One chemical plus one chemical could equal, especially in hormone-disrupting chemicals, 1,600 times the dose. And we're all walking time bombs. That is a reality. Everybody in this room. Bill Moyers did a great show about 6 years ago called Trade Secrets, which is still available, I believe, on DVD, looking at this whole issue of the multiplicity of chemicals and the problems that, I should say, of greed have caused for Americans. And as I write in The Uterine Crisis, it's all about greed. It's not about our well-being and safety. And there are countless stories about the problems of people who have become critically ill or died, stories going back to the thalidomide crisis in the 60s and 70s, toxic shock syndrome, pesticide poisonings, which are really off the scale, even for small children, and Vioxx, just to name a few. It was on the market when they knew it was unsafe, and people were spending a fortune so that the companies could make billions of dollars. We are the guinea pigs in a huge and complex experiment where the health and environmental repercussions are absolutely staggering. Babies are now born with what is called the body burden. That is, while they're growing in utero in their mom's bodies, they are already getting a chemical body burden that is passed on through the umbilical cord. And so by birth, these poor, innocent children are already affected. And there are staggering rates of birth deformities, cancers, and other reproductive-related illnesses that we did not have 20 or 30 years ago. When I was growing up, there was no such a thing as a children's hospital. Think about it. We have children's hospitals all over. What has happened? What has happened? Just think about that figure. What does 100,000 chemicals mean in a mixture that is not even being tested in its vast mathematical complicity.
This excerpt is brought to you by the Massachusetts School of Law, the leader of reform in legal education and a leader in multimedia education for the public. To view the full interview and for a full listing of MSL's programs, log on to mslaw.com.
That was a really good video, guys. The next one I want to share is What Are We Breathing? I created with the Deming from geoengineeringwatch.org. Check this information out. What are we breathing? In this video, they break down what's coming out of the jet trails. We need people to start really paying attention and put down your games.
In the geoengineering mix, these are nanoplastic particles that are spiked with aluminum, with titanium, with strontium. Basically, the oceans are covered with a sheet of plastic. The oceans can no longer evaporate the water that the atmosphere needs to keep the earth blue and green like it used to be. The algae in the ocean depend on a lot of sunlight in order to produce oxygen. And they can't do their job anymore because they're not getting the light they need. In the last 2 or 3 years, ever increasing articles about nanoplastics appearing in chicken, in fruit, in vegetables, and also in our human body. Every animal that we eat now is full of these nanoplastic particles. And these are certainly not animals that have swum in the ocean. These are land-based animals. They've never eaten a plastic bag, and yet they're accumulating these nanoparticles. And the only possible source of that is the air that they breathe.
At this late hour on our planet, when we most need alternative forms of energy, climate engineering is dramatically diminishing all 3 primary forms of alternative energy. Climate engineering is disrupting the hydrological cycle, i.e. the rain cycle, causing protracted droughts all over the world, which is dramatically reducing hydropower production. Climate engineering, by its very description, solar radiation management to block the sun, greatly diminishes solar power output all over the world. Climate engineering also reduces wind power because it reduces convection. Atmospheric layers of reflective particles reduce convection, which in turn reduces wind, which reduces evaporation, again decreasing potential power output for all other forms of energy. Many are absolutely overwhelmed when they are introduced to the climate engineering issue. They try to convince themselves that our government would never do this to us, but such a conclusion doesn't hold up to available data. All official air testing agencies generally test for 10 microns, 2.5 microns at best. Atmospheric testing has proven that climate engineering aerosols are unimaginably smaller, in the 20 to 100 nanometer range. The smaller the particle, the more deadly it is to inhale. Available science studies prove that human hearts and human brains now have not just millions, but billions of nanoparticles lodged in them. Most know that bee colonies are collapsing. What most don't know is that insect populations in general are also collapsing all over the world. Bees are dying of symptoms resembling Alzheimer's and dementia in human beings because they're packed full of aluminum. Why aren't the beekeepers acknowledging this? Why isn't this fact a headline all over the globe?
To suit our convenience, we clear other large areas of natural life in order to build towns and cities. Our homes, stores, and factories, clustered closely together, are easy marks continually tempting invasion by the insect enemies. Our only answer is to wage constant battle with the bugs. This must be intelligent, organized, well-planned warfare. We must fight our insect enemies with every weapon our imagination and science can devise. Chemical warfare is quick death to our enemies, whether used on a small scale or on a large scale. Vast areas can be treated in a short time, an outstanding advantage in our warfare against the insects.
What's it like for an insect to be poisoned by a crop-dusting aircraft? Don't we all know? Is there any difference whatsoever between crop dusting insects and the global climate engineering spray operations that have long since contaminated our entire planet and every breath we take? How can we avoid this? Answer, we can't.
You can make very high quality, and do this in just a jet in a very simple way, make high quality aluminum particles just by spraying aluminum vapor out, which oxidizes. The implementation decisions will be risk to risk decisions. The risk of doing it against the risk of not doing it.
It's very good to have research on new applications of technology that are beneficial, but it should be balanced at the same time it's developed with the study of the adverse effects, if there are any.
Now, as it happens, the Air Force conducted a study starting in 1993. It was called In Vitro Toxicity of Aluminum Nanoparticles in Rat Alveolar Macrophages. That's a real fancy way of saying testing the effect of aluminum nanoparticles on the white blood cells in the little air sacs in your lung, the alveoli. And what they found in this 8-year study was that these particles, when you're exposed to them long enough, it suppresses the ability of your white blood cells to defend you from airborne infections coming into your lungs. And so essentially by breathing this material in, your immune system is dramatically suppressed.
If we can't breathe, if we can't inhale without sucking up highly toxic, bioavailable, bioaccumulative particulates that lodge in our systems like a plaque, elements like aluminum, barium, strontium, elements that are highly toxic in and of themselves, but when combined, become exponentially more toxic.
70% of nanoparticles that are already within us are introduced to our systems through just respiration. So we breathe them into our nose, the ethmoidal sinuses then collect them, they can migrate to our frontal lobe through the olfactory nerve, and there they can generate reactive oxygen species and cause brain damages of different type.
Everything we know at present suggests that generation of reactive oxygen species is the cause of aging, cause of almost every disease that we know. Certainly dementia, but other diseases as well. A lot of the nanoparticles, not all of them, but a lot of them have metal ions. Metal ions are potent generators of reactive oxygen species. When you have nanoparticles in the body, they are small enough so they go everywhere. There's no barrier to them in any part of the body. They cross the blood-brain barrier, they cross cell membranes.
They're even more reactive or can be more damaging than virus particles. We have natural defenses against viruses. We have no natural defenses against nanomaterials. And again, they never leave our system. They don't die, they're not cleared. We don't produce antibodies against them. So we are exposing humanity to a class of materials that will continue to damage biological tissue for the lifetime of that organism.
The Japanese developed a blood washing method called apheresis that was used for reducing cholesterol and fats from the blood. And then a brilliant German toxicologist came along and modified this procedure where he could not only wash out the blood, but also the plasma from the connective tissue, which is a much deeper look into the system. The entire blood volume and plasma volume is put through a filter system several times and filters out anything that's toxic. And with this method, it's the first time you can actually measure body burden, or how much is in the entire body. And as it turns out, nanonized aluminum is by a factor of roughly 100 times, 94 to 120 times more prevalent than any other toxin, nanonized aluminum. And we know that we absorb aluminum very poorly by eating it. That cannot be the possible route how we get toxic. The only way that we can get these high levels of aluminum is through inhalation or through injection. This was a big wake-up call.
To let the evolvement of a program impact my grandchildren, even my children, not necessarily the immediate years for myself, is a very personal concern to know how it will flow down through the elements of the family.
I often find that those who question actions of the government often don't want to get involved until it directly affects them. If you look up into the sky, this is directly affecting you. If you have a family, your children, your wife, your husband, your extended family members, your animals, this is directly affecting all of us.
How can so many claim that governments and militaries around the world would not spray chemical and biological agents on populations when there are literally hundreds of historically documented cases of such operations occurring in recent decades? Many biological warfare experiments were officially used to test the range and dispersal patterns of aerosol, particulates, and biological agents. In the United States alone, by 1977, 239 open-air biological tests had been conducted over unknowing U.S. populations. Tests were conducted throughout the 20th century, many of which took place concurrently with the covert ramp-up of climate engineering operations. We are expected to believe that this experimentation was benign and not connected to the climate engineering operations, just as is the case with the ever-increasing exposure to microwave transmissions all over the world. Many of what we are told are only cellular communication towers have power supply inputs that are 10 times larger than what is needed for communications purposes. The compounding synergistic toxicity of these operations is accumulating inside all of us.
What makes us sensitive to Wi-Fi and to the electromagnetic radiation in general is the metals in our body. And we never used to have aluminum in our mitochondria. The aluminum in our mitochondria makes the inside of the mitochondria resonant with Wi-Fi, and they start heating up, and it starts destroying the mitochondrial DNA at a very, very rapid rate. And so it's really the synergy of the metals dispersed in our body and the Wi-Fi making our body a resonant antenna with the Wi-Fi environment. And of course, you know, we're going now from 3 or 4G to 5G with the ever increasing amplitude of energy that's delivered into our systems.
This is one of those life or death choices. But we're not just talking about my life or your life. We're talking about something that is killing the fundamental living system on the planet.
We are bathed now in a soup that is comprised of nanoniced aluminum. Glyphosate forms 6 different salts with aluminum and works as a carrier to carry the aluminum deep into our brains. And the only other missing thing there was to open the cell walls, open the blood-brain barrier, is the ever-increasing exposure to radio waves. Half of the people listening to this talk will die with or of dementia. And the main cause of dementia is the nanoniced aluminum particles. There's somebody behind the scene orchestrating that with the perfect understanding of the human condition and of toxicology, and brought the 3 things together that will, in a very, very rapid period of time, we're talking 6-7 years from here on, cause major destruction of the human nervous system that could be stopped at a switch. We could have a clean world tomorrow.
We need to come together for all of humanity to address this issue. And I think that the only way to do that at this point is a legal approach and to present all evidence on both sides, the evidence that we are collecting as independent scientists and the evidence that already exists in those laboratories where these materials are produced and deployed. Colleagues of mine, they don't really accept this yet. They're starting to, because I've shared some of the data that we've collected, but most of them will ignore it and do call it beat-up conspiracy theories. Well, those learned people are ignorant of the facts. And so my call to action is don't ignore things anymore. You know, we have to address this issue. It's on our doorstep. It's in our skies. It's in our children. We have to do something.
If the ongoing global climate engineering weather warfare operations are not brought to light and to a halt, allowing the planet to respond to the damage done, it will never be able to find a new equilibrium, an equilibrium that may yet allow it to sustain life into the future. Exposing and halting climate engineering operations is the great imperative. They are disrupting virtually the entire web of life.
I think we need to enlist the support of commercial airline pilots, as well as calling back and bringing these subjects up with our House and Senate members in the U.S. Congress. I think it's going to take that kind of action to get this geoengineering exposed, find out what's behind it and why they are doing this.
In my life, I have friends, family, wonderful people who are trying to stay within the official reality on the theory that they'll be safer. And the reality is, if you look at where this thing is going, you know, better we deal with it now. It's like cancer, it's only gonna get worse.
The data is what's going to change people's mind. So you need to be able to draw it out, get the reports available, and get publicity on what the conclusions are so that people believe it. It's not just someone raising a subject that has no validity. It's based on scientific data that demands changes.
We've gotten to the point where the mystery is so expensive, spiritually, psychologically, financially, legally, you know, that the time has come to say is, you know, who's really doing this and why are they behaving this way?
And I often wonder, do any of those people, you know, behind the scenes fearing reprisal, are they looking into this? There is data out there. Who's going to bring it forward?
We are rapidly running out of time to take care of this problem. That's what makes it so critical. Yeah, and I can only hope that in my lifetime, we'll have a resolution of this and we can fix it. I'd really like to see the planet stay, the life on the planet stay anyway.
How do we stop climate engineering? I'm asked this question so often. The only way forward in this fight, the only way we can expose and halt climate engineering is from the inside out. With a critical mass of awareness, a level of awareness so vast that it causes a shockwave around the world, so that populations all over the world know what their governments have done to them without their knowledge or consent. A level of awareness so vast that our military brothers and sisters and their families understand what they are really a part of, literally self-extermination. We must reach a critical mass of awareness. It is the only way we can expose and halt climate engineering processes, and this effort will take all of us.
You cannot change anything when you are dead. When you are dead, it's always gone. So as long as you are alive, do something, I would say.
I do trust human ingenuity and human intelligence, and I think we still have a chance, but things are far more serious than the general public is aware of. The song is going to be over very soon if you don't turn things around.
We have a system full of great pain and great suffering and great poverty, and you know, people sort of walking around in the dark playing bumper cars. It doesn't have to be. And so part of what has me so optimistic is I know what's possible. I know that what we have now is tiny compared to what's possible. So now's the time to figure out what's going on and why.
Now, our only chance is to stop interfering with Earth's life support systems, to expose and halt climate engineering once and for all, allow the planet to respond to the damage done to it on its own. Climate engineering is not a cure. Climate engineering is a curse, even worse than the disease it claims to treat. Time is not on our side. The sand in the hourglass is running out at blinding speed. Please, make your voice heard. Make every day count.